Now, is that a shelf fungus or what? Is that amazing? That is a shelf fungus. And remember in the book it talked about some of them will grow year after year and keep adding. My mom had it on the back porch because she thought it was pretty. I go, it is pretty. It's a shelf fungus, though. May I borrow it? She goes, sure. My dad's like, throw it away. I go, no, it's cool looking. It really is. It almost looks like wood, doesn't it? And but it's very light, okay? Because this is actually the fruiting body. Now, I did go out while I was at my parents' the last time and found you some actual live shelf fungus so that I'm going to put one on each table and you guys can try to find the spores in the shelves. Okay, these are little ones that I pulled off of some dead rotting wood. Some of them will actually live on live wood, but these were on dead wood, and those are more often than not, because remember they're saprophytes, so they decompose dead things. And if they're kind of furry on the bottom. When you feel them, you'll see what I'm saying. They're hard on the top and furry on the bottom. And the bottom is where you're going to find the spores. Now remember, in this, in Ascomycota, the basidia spores, isn't that convenient? The basidia spores are found in the basidia, which are the club-shaped cells that they're found in. Wow, that was hard. And so, let's see. Oh, that is a modified hyphae constricting around a nematode. I thought that was pretty interesting. Oh, I know why. That's, never mind, we'll come back to that. Okay, so there's your shelf fungus, there's your mushroom, there's your puffballs. Now, Eric brought the puffballs, and once again, this would be the mycelium. So this is actually the puffball, but this is the fruiting body up here. And at first I said to him, no, that's not a puffball, because if I squeeze it, it's not puffing. Because a mature puffball, when it's outside, if the rain hits it, it's enough to puff the spores out of it. So if you squeezed it, it would kind of be like squeezing a pastry, because it would give and let the spores out. But before giving up, I broke one open, and he brought enough for everybody, which I really, really appreciate. I broke one open, and you notice that is not a mushroom. That is not a mushroom. It's just full of spores. There's no gills. Do you see it? There's no gills or anything. So I want everybody to make sure that today while do you see it? Mm-hmm. That today while we're doing lab today, that you go ahead and look at those spores under the microscope. Because these are actually, and thank you, that's the first time I think we've ever had puffballs in class. That's why I was trying to get you to bring them, but yours died, didn't they?
I found other ones.
You did? You did?
I did.
Okay.
But they're really squishy, so I think they're...
Bring them next week.
They're in a bag right here.
You've got it.
Yes.
May I have one, please? Okay, believe it or not, Mom looked it up online, and this thing, I can do this really. Wow, it's falling apart. That thing was the Ascomycota too. Now see, I'd have guessed. Oh man. Oh, I had to.
It smells like rotting meat.
It does. It really, really does.
They call it...
It looks like rotting meat. It looks like rotting meat. Look at it. It's red. Yeah. And it smells like rotting meat. Would you just get me a wet paper towel?
Sure.
Please, anybody? Thank you. Before I have to touch anything.
Maybe there's a reason for that. Like
Oh, I can tell you it is. It does attract flies and different things. Things that smell like rotting meat. There's flowers that actually smell like rotting meat because it attracts the pollinators, and I'm sure that's the situation with this too. Wow, that's a trip. Okay, so we see different versions of the Ascomycota. Turn over to page 104, please. And you guys are going to be looking at them today. You're going to be looking at the mushrooms under the microscope, and I want you to look at the puffballs, spores under the microscope, and any other parts you can get to look at the puffball. If you're feeling real brave, you can look at the meat sneaky one. If you're feeling real brave, you feel free, but it's really stinky. And then you need to look at the shelf fungi too. The things we do for science. Okay, so on page 104, we have the life cycle of a mushroom. Let's start over at about just past 9 o'clock, where the two mycelium grow from the spore. No. Yeah, let's do that. You have the spore, and out of it, you have mycelium growing out of the spore. So that makes the actual mushroom, because that's what the mushroom is made up of. When two of the mycelium come together and fuse, then they start to grow what we're going to think of as the fruiting body, which is what we think of as a mushroom. And when it starts to get a whole bunch of mycelium under that membrane, it's called the button stage, and it kind of pops up overnight. That's what we're told. You guys have all seen that before, right? You're walking around and there's a mushroom there and it wasn't there yesterday because it rained last night or whatever. Well, it's been growing in the ground, and now it's absorbed the water, thump, and it shows up. And then it produces the stipe and the cap, and in the cap are gills, and that was what was missing in the puffball, is there's no gills. Well, in a mushroom, there's lots of gills. And so, it smells like a mushroom. And so, so in the gills are actually the basidia, and the basidia spores are in those gills. And so once it gets totally happy, which I noticed Ryan has one back there that looks totally happy. May I? Yeah, it's nice and spread out. And I'm sure this came out of his yard. But look at the gills on there. Do you see how spread out they are? Because they'll be full of spores, and so this mushroom will spread completely out so that those spores can be released everywhere, and more mycelia can grow, and it'll grow more mushrooms. And remember, that's its job, is the fruiting body, because really the mushroom is the mycelium. We would look at it as the little hairy things on the very bottom of the stalk. That's actually the mushroom itself. We're looking at the fruiting body of the mushroom. Thank you, sir. Okay. So we're told in here that the membrane is a thin covering of tissue. We're told, if you'll turn to page 106, you'll see the fairy rings, because as the mushrooms eat the dead stuff, then they'll continue to move out from one another because they've already eaten the dead stuff in the middle. So they'll continue to move out, and that way they'll turn into fairy rings. We already talked about puffballs, and I think, yep. Puffballs, shelf fungi, regular mushrooms, which I don't know about you, but I didn't know they came in bright red. So I always thought that was on Alice in Wonderland. I didn't think that was reality. And then it talked about parasitic basidia. There's the life cycle of the mushroom. Okay, we've already talked about that. Puffballs. There's a puffball, giving it up. If you squish it, you see all the dust? That's somebody's finger. They're pushing on the puffball. And that shows you all the dust coming out of it, because I had a feeling we wouldn't be able to see it here. There's your shelf fungi. It's pretty ones, huh? Here we go. It talks about the parasitic basidia, mycota, and there are rusts, and they are very, very technical. They destroy the wheat. They make 3 different types of spores. They make the Uridia spores, which show up and look like the rust on the wheat, and then they make the Telia spores. Let me get it right now. And there's one more. They make the Ascomycota. And if you'll remember the life cycle it talked about, they had to get on the bayberry bush in spring. And without the bayberry bush, if you can remove the bayberry bushes, they don't have this alternate host and they'll die, which is a good thing because it destroys the wheat crop. So thank God you don't have to memorize that, but it went through that life cycle, and that there were the Uridia spores, the Telia spores, the Ascomycota, and then it talked about how they destroy a whole bunch of wheat, and so you have to be careful to get rid of them. And then there's smuts. Don't you love that one? Smuts. And smuts get on wheat, rye, barley. They kill millions of dollars of food crops. And they can grow fungi-resistant crops, but that's what smut on corn looks like. And I don't know about you, but I looked at that and went, oh, your corn's really moldy, man. I wouldn't have known that's a smut, but that's a smut. And that can destroy whole crops. So I just wanted you to see what they look like. And then turn a page, please. The next class on page 109, phylum, is Ascomycota, and these are sac fungi. And so your book points out cup fungi, morel, which looks more like the thing you brought in. Look at the morel on page 109. Only yours is red, isn't it? Doesn't that look more like it? But the thing online said it's a Basidiomycota, which surprises me. But it looks kind of spongy, like the morel. And then the other example is yeast, which I have back there for you so that you can look at it. And it talked about how the yeasts bud, and instead of separating and then growing into two individuals, it'll actually have the baby like asexually reproduce and continue to grow until they're full size, and then it might do it again and again. So that would be asexual reproduction in yeast, and yeast is one of the exceptions to the rules in fungi because it's a single cellular organism rather than a multicellular organism. And they can make fermentation, which is on page 110. Fermentation is where it breaks down sugars, there you go, anaerobically breaks down sugars into smaller molecules. And fermentation, it mentioned here about wine, but fermentation can be a really good thing for us if you drink kombucha or you eat kimchi. Fermented foods are very good for us because they actually help to feed the good for you bacteria in your gut. So all fermentation isn't bad, but this went through the fermentation process in sugars and how alcohol was formed. And then yeast is, the yeast actually breathe, and that's what makes the bread puff up because it makes air pockets in the bread and it puffs it up. So anyway, and then in Ascomycota, like I said, if you'll turn over to page 112, they have asci, which are the fruiting bodies, and those are showing you some of the asci, where the spores would be, ascospores would be in there. That shows you actually the ascospores in the asci cells, okay? There's some morels. Those are yeast, and notice these yeast are budding, okay? And then it talked about that there were types of fungi in this phylum called ergot of rye, which are deadly to people. And it showed that. And then you will see it in wheat. And I've eaten wheat like this before. This freaked me out when I saw this because it can be deadly to people. I've seen dark kernels in my wheat before. So apparently that's very dangerous because you can get ergot of rye that way. And then it talked about how the Dutch elm disease and the chestnut blight wiped out the American chestnut tree, and that's what an American chestnut tree looks like, and that's what it looks like when it's affected by one of these fungi. And this is the Dutch elm disease, and that shows you it's got Dutch elm disease, which is a fungus that attacks this tree. And then that was an American chestnut tree. I didn't know what one looked like. And so that's what they looked like before they were wiped out. And this is telling that, and see how old this picture is? You see how the people are dressed? This is probably like late 1800s that this picture was done. And they're trying to genetically re-engineer the American chestnut tree. And those are the little bitty baby chestnut trees that they're trying to do it from. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they're trying to bring it back and save it. And then the last one you had to read about was zygospores. Oh no, did we stop there?
Yeah.
That we're done. All right, go back, let's look at our lab. Let's see, on page 108, you're not going for a walk. Let's see, you're going to observe a mushroom, and I have a mushroom for everybody if you don't have your own. You're going to look at it under the magnifying glass. You're supposed to look at all the parts. What I really want you to do is the microscope work because you can do the rest of it at home if need be. So you're going to take, in here you have tweezers, and you're going to take your set of tweezers and you're going to pull one gill off of the mushroom, which is hard. I'm going to give you the heads up, okay? You're going to pull one gill off the mushroom. And then it tells us, guys, stop talking for just a minute, please. You're going to take that gill and you're going to put it on the slide. I think they want you to put a drop of water on there and then put the slide cover on it. Yep, they do. And you're supposed to look at the actual basidia spores in the basidia. So in the gill, you'll see that. If you get more than one gill, you're not going to be able to see anything. And go to the edge of the gill, or it's going to be too thick to see also. Then you're supposed to take the mushroom and go like that. Just hit it on the slide, put a drop of water on, put the slide cover on, and look at the spores. They look like little dots everywhere that came off it just by popping it. Okay? Do that. And then do the same thing on the spores with the puffball and with the shelf fungus. Guys, I want you to look. This is the base of the shelf fungus that Jake was kind enough to bring in. This shows you the mycelium that's found at the root. And look at the hyphae. Let me just see if I can do this without losing it. There you go. There's your hyphae. So this shows you the mycelium is made up of the hyphae. And you're going to be looking at a lot more of this next week. But thank you so much. You found it this week, which is great, you know. But does everybody see? This is exactly what we're talking about. And this is at the base of the shelf fungus. So this is actually the shelf fungus. And the thing that we're looking at is the fruiting body. I got to move this because I'm going to give it back. So everybody saw it? Yep. There they are. Guys, you see the little balls? Those are the yeast. This is the yeast at 400 power. So they're very, very small, aren't they? Okay. Now, I don't see any budding here, and I set it up during lunch, so you would think we would have some budding. Oh, look, 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 there's one. Do you see it? And there's one. It's got 4 balls on it, so that's been budding. And do you see how they're all about equal size? Ryan found a fungus on a rock. This is at 100 power. Look at the spores on this fungus on this rock at 100 power. And I'll bet you... Wow. Do you see? I would imagine that those are attached by mycelia, you know, by aerial mycelia. Well, so that would be aerial hyphae, wouldn't it, right? Okay.